Hello and welcome to episode 44 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. With the release of the new version of The Magnificent Seven, we're going to watch John Sturges' 1960 classic, which itself was a reimagining of Akira Kurosawa's iconic film, The Seven Samurai. This is the first time we've actually ever done a Western on this podcast, which is surprising to us since we would both list at least one Western among our favorite films.
Along with solidifying Steve McQueen's place as a screen idol, The Magnificent Seven has established itself as an iconic Western, despite being more or less considered a flop at the time of its release. The film's recognizable score and archetypal characters helped set the standard for many Westerns to come after it. It wasn't, however, apparently iconic enough to be untouchable for a remake.
But does iconic status mean the movie is actually any good?
Or does The Magnificent Seven need to be carted out of town and buried? Keep listening.
We need help.
We must buy guns. We know nothing about them. Will you buy guns for us?
Guns are very expensive and hard to get. Why don't you hire men?
Men?
Gunmen. Nowadays, men are cheaper than guns.
Will you go?
It will be a blessing if you came to help us.
Sorry, I'm not in the blessing business.
No, we offer more than that. We could feed you every day.
And we have this.
What's that?
We can sell this for gold. Everything we own. Everything of value in the village.
I've been offered a lot for my work, but never everything.
All right, so there's a clip from the movie we're discussing today, Magnificent Seven. The Yul Brynner as Chris Adams, a gunfighter.
Somewhat reluctant hero in this movie.
Yeah. Being offered everything, though, in that scene. Have you ever been offered everything, Ryan?
No.
I was. I didn't take it. I really regret that.
Yeah, I mean, everything's a lot.
I know, and, well, it's a lot to that person who offers it. And I don't know.
It's a lot to be responsible for once you get it.
I think it was before I had seen this movie, and I didn't see the point. Now I saw Magnificent Seven, and I guess I would have gone back and taken it.
Yeah, after just seeing it just once, I don't think I'd go for everything, but maybe on a repeat viewing.
Yeah.
I can see the appeal. But the poor villagers seeking the help of cutthroats.
Yeah. It's a tale as old as Kurosawa.
Yep.
Which
that tired cliche. So I haven't seen this movie before. So we keep just filling in movies that I've overlooked, which is fine. But you saw it. Have you seen it more than once?
No, this Magnificent Seven was a movie that was in that period we've talked about many times, where it was sort of that post-college, just tearing
crossing
through
off the
movies
list.
to check off the list, and Magnificent Seven was one that I did that with. So I'd only seen it once, and I did like it a lot. Which is interesting because I knew going into it that it was based off of Seven Samurai,
Which you didn't.
which I didn't like.
Right.
I just thought it was way too long. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack.
Well, you won't get as much flack as I will for not having seen the Seven Samurai.
What are you doing on this podcast?
I don't know. I don't know. I know. But I will say I've seen lots of Kurosawa and don't really love it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You kind of have to keep the fact that you're not a Kurosawa fan to yourself if you're talking to a lot of film buffs, you know.
Although, I mean, if you go the Mark Cousins route and set up that there has to be do you like Kurosawa or Ozu? I kind of like Ozu.
Yeah,
better.
I would probably say the same.
Yeah. So there you go. I lose my credibility by not seeing Seven Samurai. I gain my credibility by saying I prefer Ozu to Kurosawa.
So I guess that makes us even.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm glad that Hollywood liked Seven Samurai enough to remake it as a Magnificent Seven and as a Western. I think it fits really well as a Western.
Oh, definitely.
So I've only seen it the one time. So with the remake, the Antoine Fuqua remake that just came out, you haven't seen
just
it
this week.
you?
Oh, of course not. I've got a 5-month-old. you know.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
We don't see movies anymore. Movies?
Yeah.
Movies once were in
Well,
theaters.
I mean, honestly, Antoine Fuqua remake of The Seventh Samurai really doesn't like get me reaching for my wallet.
Wasn't on the top of your 2016
No,
must-see.
we gotta get a
list.
babysitter.
Yeah.
Nope.
You probably aren't a fan of any of Fuqua's work, because you're not a huge fan of Training Day.
I'm not a huge fan of Training Day, no. I mean, talking about
You do Southpaw, right?
Fuqua's work, yeah, which I didn't see.
I didn't either, but I saw The Equalizer, which was fine.
I saw King Arthur, which is horrible.
Yeah, I guess if I start thinking about it, maybe Training Day is the only one that I would really say I really liked of Fuqua's. But you never know. I've seen some of the early reviews pouring in for the new Magnificent Seven.
They're
pouring in.
You've got your intern running in. Got another one, Mr. Goss.
Well, it's just a ticker that's just been going crazy. But it's not looking good so far.
No, it doesn't seem like it. Honestly, I'm not surprised. I mean,
it was a good cast.
I can speculate as to why it wouldn't have been good based on what I like about the new one.
All right. Well,
I anticipate. The new one?
Based on
what I
like
about the old one.
Okay.
What I anticipate the new one would avoid.
Okay.
There's probably some overlap there.
Sure. Well, I'm sure that'll be something that would be good to get into once we get into our discussion. So you don't have any story of seeing this, so we should just pivot to
you.
Okay.
No, you already did it. Yeah, you.
I was just gonna.
It was on a list of movies. Oh, what?
Yeah, no. I don't have anywhere else to add about my first time seeing it. I guess it was aside from his portrayal as Pharaoh in Ten Commandments, it was really my only other exposure to Yul Brynner.
You never saw The King and I?
No, I haven't. And I guess in Magnificent Seven, the first time I saw it, that was what I think stuck out to me. I remembered Yul Brynner a lot more after seeing Magnificent Seven, and just really liked his character in it. But it's one of those movies that I was excited to rewatch just because I remembered so little of it, other than just the basic plot. You know, I really didn't have any recollection of. I knew I liked it, but I couldn't really remember why. So it was good to get back to it.
Well, good.
And I'm also, I enjoy a classic Western frequently.
Oh.
So, it was.
I do too. Yeah.
I was excited to just watch a Western.
Yeah. Westerns typically I do enjoy, but I mean, as with like the remake of the Magnificent Seven, I'm not like, well, if it's a Western, I've got to see it.
Right.
I just know that there are several movies that I like that happen to be Westerns.
Right. And the Western as a genre is one that, you could even be someone who says, I like Westerns, and you have maybe are only talking about one subgenre of Western that you like. You know, I think if we're going to talk about Westerns and why we like them, you almost have to kind of say, well, I like this genre of Western because of this reason.
Yeah.
And so, when a new Western comes out, I'm not necessarily going to automatically be rushing to the theater to see it, because I kind of have to figure out where does it fit, and is it something that I think is going to be, adding to the genre?
Right. I feel like there was kind of a run of almost like deconstructionist Westerns a couple of years ago with like 3:10 to Yuma and The Proposition, and not necessarily deconstructionist, but ones that sort of took like the darker view rather than the more romanticized.
Oh, for
view.
sure.
And I really enjoyed that.
I loved it.
Minor research.
There was even, you could put like Assassination of Jesse James in that camp there. A really good run. And what was that, like mid 2000s?
Yeah, like probably like culminating in 2007.
Right. With like you could even make a case for No Country being like a contemporary Western and sort of,
And There Will Be Blood being a Western of sorts. And It
was a cool period for Westerns, I think. So anyways, this is your first time seeing Magnificent Seven. What did you think?
Well, should I letterbox it? Like,
sure.
You want me to make up a letterbox rating?
Yeah, why not?
Honestly, I'd say like 3.5, but like a good 3.5.
You mean like a, that was satisfying.
Sure. Yeah. How about you? Did you have a rating on it?
Yeah, I had it at a 4 stars. Yeah. I'd keep it at that.
Okay.
I actually do think of the classic Westerns. It's still up there as one of my favorites in that period. And actually, coming out in 1960, it was sort of like the the very, very end of that period of Western that you were seeing, I think, before you started getting into
spaghetti Western.
Yeah, or like the more revisionist kind of Westerns, and when
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood started hitting the scene.
Yeah.
Took a lot more of a cynical view towards the hero. Because, this is a lot more of like sort of the within the same vein as like your John Fords and, even like the Howard Hawks stuff.
Yeah. And High Noon and that sort of hero. So yeah, one thing, as soon as the movie started and the score started playing, I was like, oh, I know this movie. Like I had no idea that score was from The Magnificent Seven. Like it's just such a classic Western score.
It is like the Western score.
Yeah,
like
aside from maybe like Ennio Morricone's whistling.
Sure, yeah, that's right. But I mean, if you were going to do maybe like a parody of a Western,
the American Western,
yes,
like Blazing
that Elmer
Saddles,
Bernstein,
like sort of,
yeah. Even if you've never seen the movie, you've heard
this
the
music.
score.
Yep.
Yeah.
So immediately I was there with it. This movie's always been there. Like this is it felt very familiar.
It had like the right typography, even
exactly. Yeah. And
in the credits and
the
everything.
scenery and like then it immediately starts with the scene where the action's happening and like the bad guys invade the little village, and it's just, I mean, it's everything that you expect out of a Western right away. And then pretty quickly shifted to what I wouldn't expect out of a Western, and that is like dealing with racism. In the second scene, all of a sudden, they're dealing with the prejudice of the town who won't let a Native American be buried in their cemetery.
Right.
And
I had forgotten that whole scene from the first time I viewed it, but I think this time around it was certainly something that struck me as probably peculiar for a reason at the time. I mean, you're dealing with like civil rights in 1960 as well.
Yeah. But I don't think even people were like dealing with Native American rights in 1960. I don't know. I guess I don't.
No. I almost feel like it was one of those, using the Western as a way of bringing to light contemporary social
sort of
issues.
Ignoring the fact that there was really a lot of bad racism towards Native Americans and continuing and that sort of thing. But it just surprised me, and it actually kind of set the tone for the rest of the movie. It was a much more sensitive movie than I expected it to be. I don't recall, just a quick rundown, I don't recall a Western that gave so much time to Mexican characters. And most of them speak without an accent, like I said, which I mean isn't, of course, accurate, but they're not cartoons.
No, they're not caricaturized.
They're not like Speedy Gonzalez.
I also think it's important that at first they're actually going to go get the guns for themselves. And they don't know how to fire them, but that's their original intent: is we need to defend ourselves. Let's go get some guns.
Right.
So they're not weak people.
Right.
They're just kind of out of their element. They're farmers.
Right. But they're taking a stand in a new way, and like, they're pretty empowered people. And then even once they do hire them, they hire them to like
train them.
Yeah. Help them out. And then, just so throughout the movie, and Charles Bronson's character also was very like aware of the needs of the people. Like I was just really surprised. Like that scene where they're eating dinner.
How's the food?
Great.
Chicken enchiladas, carne asada, and Spanish rice. Looks pretty good.
Yeah, these people really know how to cook. Dig in. There's tons of it.
Well, you know what these people, the villagers, have been eating ever since we got here? Tortillas and a few beans, that's all.
Well, I think that's kind of one of the major themes of the movie is this idea of just service and humble service. And it can seem quaint and old-fashioned, but really the movie is about doing the right thing just to do the right thing. It's weird how that doesn't date the movie as much as you would think. It's still kind of refreshing to see. And I wonder what the new Magnificent Seven kind of does with that theme.
Well, I think also from what I heard, it's not a group of Mexicans who ask for help.
No, in the new
In
one?
the new one, yeah.
No, it's a
woman.
It's a town that is being, and it's actually not, and it's also not a group of bandits that keep threatening the town. It's actually like a big business coming in to take over the town. So that's like a new contemporary spin.
Yeah. Well, now I'm kind of interested to see it, to see how they...
Oh no, what have I done?
Dang it. Yeah, so that was just one thing that really surprised me about it. It was just a very smart, sensitive, thoughtful movie. In most ways. I think there are some ways where it's still made in 1960. You remember the scene after, like, the younger cowboy, Chico, finds the girl?
Mm-hmm.
Who is she?
From our village.
So that's where they were. You hid them.
Sure they hid them, but she won't tell where. They're afraid. She's afraid of me, you, him, all of us. Farmers. The families told them we raped them.
Well, we might. In my opinion, though, you might have given us the benefit of the doubt. But just as you please.
No, as long as you were out there. Why didn't you bring them all in?
What for? Leave them out there. Let Calvera find them. He'll take good care of them.
I don't know. Maybe this is just me projecting how I would react if somebody said, "Oh, they thought you were going to rape them." I'd be like, "What? No, what? What?" I wouldn't be like, "Well, it's possible. You were right to be concerned."
I felt like that line was kind of in keeping with Yul Brynner's character, though, as someone who certainly has a code of his own and is on the side of right, throughout pretty much the entire movie. But, he's going to say it his way, and he's not going to worry about how people react to the way he says it. Another example that's certainly not like this, but, I like the scene where they're trying to recruit the Bronson character, Bernardo, who,
O'Reilly.
he's chopping wood, and he's talking about how much money he made in these past gigs.
Yeah.
And with total confidence, Yul Brynner just says, "Well, this one pays $20."
Yeah.
And it's not like but it's a great, and he doesn't even like look at him like, well, it's just like take it or leave it. He says, "Well, this job's $20," and immediately starts turning around and walking away, not apologizing for it be $20, not explaining the situation. And then Bronson just says, "Well, $20 is a lot right now." Yul Brynner was just such a cool character. He knows why he's doing it. He doesn't need to explain it to anybody else.
Yeah, and he doesn't care why anybody else would do it.
Right. He does it again, and this I think is one of my favorite parts of the movie, actually, is when you have Calvera. This is at the end, actually. Calvera's been shot, and he's saying to Yul Brynner, "You came back. Why would you come back? Why?"
You came back for a place like this. Why? A man like you. Why?
And I love that Yul Brynner does not even, there's no line.
Doesn't answer him.
It's like, if I have to explain it to you, you don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you as a viewer know, because in your head, you're actually saying, because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And I love that the way that this movie makes that sort of pie in the sky morality tolerable is by basically not spelling it out for you. It never actually says, this is just the right thing to do and that's why you do it. It's just, we're doing it.
Saying like, it's the right thing to do. We don't need to tell you it's the right thing to do. We're just going to show you somebody doing it.
And watching it this time around, especially thinking through this lens of like the Western always being this idea of what masculinity should be.
Definitely.
Looking at our models of masculinity right now, we certainly know the guy who is sort of in our face all the time. How would someone like Donald Trump or someone who sees that as an ideal for masculinity view Yul Brynner in this movie?
What would you think of this movie? Yeah.
A guy who says, I don't care if it's just $20, I'm going to defend these Mexicans.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
Because they need it. because they are poor and they're disadvantaged and it's not fair, and I can do something to help. So I'm going to just do it.
Even though I'm not going to come out ahead.
I'm not going to go ahead. I might not even come out
might
alive.
Die. Yeah.
Anybody who's going to try to tell me that someone like Donald Trump is running because he's serving his country, I mean, it's just a joke to me.
Right.
He's Calvera.
Yeah. The ideas of masculinity also came through to me a lot, especially that Charles Bronson character, Bernardo, when those three boys say like, oh, we want, I don't even know what exactly they say, but something like, we want you to be our role model, basically, instead of our fathers.
Take us with you, please.
No.
We're ashamed to live here. Our fathers are cowards.
Don't you ever say that again about your fathers, because they are not cowards. You think I'm brave because I carry a gun? Well, your fathers are much braver because they carry responsibility. For you, your brothers, your sisters, and your mothers. And this responsibility is like a big rock that weighs a ton. It bends and it twists them until finally it buries them under the ground. And as nobody says they have to do this, they do it because they love you and because they want to. I have never had this kind of courage. Running a farm, working like a mule every day with no guarantee will ever come of it. This is bravery. That's why I never even started anything like that. That's why I never will.
That just because he came in and he's muscly and has a gun,
right?
He's the man you should follow, and he's just puts that to bed and says like, no, your fathers are heroes too. Like, no matter what is going on.
Yeah, that was a great touch. And speaking of, could you imagine getting spanked by Charles Bronson?
No.
Did you see it?
No.
Like, that's just such an odd scene to me. You know what I'm talking about? He just starts spanking that kid.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd imagine being that kid growing older, like, I was spanked by...
Spanked me. Where were my parents?
Like, seeing some cowboy, like, spanking some kid. It made me laugh a lot, actually, when I saw it. Not intentionally. I don't think it was supposed to be funny.
No, I don't think it was either. But I will just say that the question, can you imagine getting spanked by Charles Bronson?
And you're saying yes.
It's an interesting question. I said no.
Oh, okay.
But it felt very much like that moment in Wayne's World where Garth asks if he ever thought that Bugs Bunny was attractive when he put on a dress and dressed like a girl bunny. Like, no, me neither. Yeah, so that just really surprised me, especially, honestly, much as I love the Man with No Name trilogy, Once Upon a Time in the West is my favorite Western.
Is it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that, too. That's a great movie. I love that movie.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
But they're all in response to a Magnificent Seven type of movie.
Yeah.
And I kind of always wrote those off as being, idealistic, almost nationalistic, like Manifest Destiny pushing sort of things.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that's the case with Magnificent Seven or like a movie like High Noon. Like, I think it's like, I think it may be in some of the John Wayne ones.
Some of them, but even if you really dig into
Searchers,
Stagecoach,
Stagecoach and Searchers, not.
I think that your reading is exactly what my reading used to be too. In fact, I had a list that's since been updated. It was called Best Westerns, and if I was just listing out my favorite westerns, and they were almost all stuff that were from 1965 and later. And actually, Evan, who's been on the show before, called me out on it and said, your entire list is revisionist westerns or spaghetti westerns, and so it's like you really haven't even dug into the genre if you don't have any of those in your list. And so then I did really start going through and either rewatching stuff I had written off, or
really thinking about what you would...
or just really trying to catch up on that. And that reading of it being, the simple morality, nationalistic, Manifest Destiny stuff, it's a very surface reading.
Yeah.
There were so many of those westerns, and probably a huge portion of those were very much, that very cliched or very simplistic type of western that was just kind of cranked out by the studio to be the western to put out. But the ones that have since kind of bubbled to the surface as being, these classic westerns are certainly, worthy of our attention and rewatching and trying to dig into the more complicated things they were trying to express in those movies.
I mean, I had seen High Noon a while ago, and I liked it, but then I rewatched it in the last year, and I loved it. One, I mean, it's got like the real time, you know, that sort of like thing, but it's just the sense of dread is so palpable, and the isolation, and I think that is something that has become a myth of the like the classic American cowboy, like the doesn't need anybody. But what these movies are all showing is like you always need somebody. That to stand alone is the worst way to live. I think Magnificent Seven shows that. I mean, it's like the fact that he goes and gets six other people. Like he doesn't just think he can come in and do it himself.
Magnificent Seven certainly doesn't fit into that. It doesn't fit into that mythology of the West, of the lone gunman. Not at all. You know.
Yeah, I think the more I watch these older Westerns, the more I realize that there's a lot to them that I don't know exactly what the revisionist Westerns felt like they were rebelling against now, as much as I love them, you know?
Part of, I think, what they were somewhat addressing that you do see in the classic Westerns is the way that those classic Westerns set up morality. So in Magnificent Seven, for instance, like there is never any question that these are the good guys and these are the bad guys.
Yeah.
And you can even sort of gather that some of these people within this group of seven have a, you know, somewhat shady past or have some things that don't make them quite squeaky clean.
Right.
But they're not going to tell you or show you that in the movie.
No.
You're really meant to believe that these guys are, you know, almost entirely good and that Calvera and his men are entirely bad.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's actually, I think the more I watch the classic Westerns, I'm just kind of okay with accepting that because it's not that, even though the setup of morality is very simple, the way that those play out usually result in some very fascinating morality challenges for the viewer, you know. But I think what the revisionist Westerns were doing a lot of with, especially like, you know, a character, you know, like The Man with No Name, or, you know, even the later stuff, like when you've got like a movie like The Proposition, or, you know, these are people where
Unforgiven.
It's kind of like what you saw with television with like the anti-hero, you know, and just bringing that anti-hero idea, which, you know, as film got more gritty and just more murky in its portrayal of morality, the Westerns were just kind of responding to that and kind of playing into that a little bit. You're never questioning with the Magnificent Seven whether you should be rooting for them. I mean, you of course you do, you know.
But I also think that, like, of course you do because of what they're doing. Like, their actions are showing. I think from the first thing they do is they take the body of an Indian that the townspeople are saying, don't bury him there because he's not white. Like, that's a guy I can trust. Like, it's not like he just walks on to the scene and shoots somebody and I'm like, oh, he probably did that for a good reason. You know, like their actions are showing like they're doing things that are selfless from the beginning.
Maybe even more than what I was saying before is I think later Westerns maybe just had a more, I won't even say realistic, I'll just say cynical view of what can realistically be expected of a human being in their context. You know, like, of course, that was the right thing to do, was for them to stand up to allow this Native American to be buried in the cemetery. That was the right thing to do.
Yeah, but would somebody actually
someone
do that?
In that time period with all the same, you know, prejudices around them,
right?
You know, I think the later Westerns would be a lot more cynical about whether anything could realistically play out like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. There was a point in the movie, and I don't even remember what point it was, where I wrote in my notes, I read too much cynical history to not be cynical about this.
Yeah.
It's this sort of aspirational Western.
Yeah.
It's just so hard, especially, you know, the way that we're so used to viewing history now.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to be aspirational when we know exactly how things typically played out. Like, okay, you happen to find the 7 white people in history who would be willing to be sacrificial for the sake of people that are typically looked down upon. So yeah, I think that is a modern cynicism that makes the more moral aspects harder to swallow. But I kind I don't know. I kind of gave myself over to them, but I also don't think that they're as cut and dry as, like you said.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty honest look, and it's not the type of white savior because, like we said, they set out to buy guns, and Yul Brynner just says, you could do this a little bit more cheaply. And his whole attitude from the beginning is to help them help themselves, like do what they can't do, but empower them to do more than they have done. And
well, even the action scenes at the end are just as much the people in the village taking down these bandits as it is the actual 7 gunfighters,
right? Who most of them die.
Like, all but 3. So
it was a much more nuanced movie than I expected it to be. I expected it to be broad and typical, but I don't think it is.
No, I don't either. And what I was saying before isn't a knock against Magnificent Seven. It's more of a reflection of myself where, first of all, it's coming to terms with, why do I have to be cynical about 7 people who decide to do the right thing? Am I that cynical in my own life? Basically, I think I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And saying, so what makes these people...
Would you roll your eyes at somebody who does?
Right. It's more on me than it is on the movie. It's also more recognizing that it's okay, I think, for a movie to just be aspirational once in a while.
Especially when it's so thoughtful in every other aspect.
Yeah. I mean, there's a simplistic way to do it that's cheap,
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie, it earns those 7 characters acting the way that they do.
Yeah.
And you do feel good just watching them do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think like there's something that's just so useful about that. And actually, I was listening to the recent Fresh Air interview with Antoine Fuqua, talking about why he wanted to remake Magnificent Seven. And a lot of that obviously went back to him watching it as a kid.
Yeah.
And Terry Gross asked him, what was it about the movie that really impacted you? And he talked about how he wouldn't necessarily say Magnificent Seven changed the way he acted, but there were scenes in it, and he specifically talked about the Native American burial scene that would then, when he was at school and kids were being bullied, he felt empowered to stand up for them. And there was something about Magnificent Seven that was reinforcing for him in real life this idea of like you just got to do the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. And if people as cool as Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen are doing it, that doesn't hurt.
That
either.
I think is so crucial to the movie, that these are just cool characters.
Yeah.
They simultaneously have that masculinity that we would all want, and they subvert it with the way that outpours in just service to people.
Right, yeah. Another thing that I think helps those characters is that we really do get to know them through a lot of conversation scenes. Which could be boring, and some viewers may find them boring. But I thought that not only was there a lot of good character development, a lot of good thematic development, but also there are scenes where there's almost more drama and action in the dialogue before a fight than is in the actual fight. I'm thinking of like the scene where they're like arguing about whether or not they should just give up.
I'm not saying we bit off more than we can chew, but I do say this. We ought to have a serious talk right now along the lines of what we're going to do.
We start acting like we had some good sense. Now, we figured to raise the ante just enough to make Calvera play someplace else. Well, we figured wrong.
We didn't figure on being the only game in town.
A man can't call them all.
I didn't say he could. All I'm saying is that sometimes you bend with the breeze, or you break.
You want to go?
Well, there comes a time to turn Mother's picture to the wall and get out. The village will be no worse off than it was before we came.
You forget one thing. We took a contract.
It's not the kind any court would enforce.
That's just the kind you've got to keep.
It's a noble thought, but the way things are right now, I don't know.
The odds are too high.
Much too high.
Can we go?
No.
They reminded me a little bit of the movie that came out a few years ago, Appaloosa. I don't know if you saw that.
Didn't see that one.
I really enjoyed that movie. My wife hated it. She just thought it was so boring. I don't think she really likes Westerns anyway. But Appaloosa is almost all talking. Like it'll take 15, 20 minutes of them sitting in their hotel room before the fight they know that's going to happen. And then the fight happens the way gunfights do. The fight is maybe 6 seconds. It's just blam, 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 blam. And somebody gets hit and somebody doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie's got a few gunfights, but I would be surprised if there was over 3 minutes of actual like shooting.
Interesting.
In the entire movie, because it's all these conversations before, and then sorting out the aftermath. Which, I mean, that's just realistic with gun fights. It's not very like long, drawn out, like choreographed things. Magnificent Seven has more choreographed fight scenes like that, but they also lend a lot of that time to the mindset before a fight and the mindset after a fight, which I think is vital to understanding the characters.
Well, yeah, there's even the whole conversation where they're listing out what are the advantages and disadvantages of being a gunfighter.
You think it's worth it?
Don't you?
It's only a matter of knowing how to shoot a gun. Nothing big about that.
Hey, how can you talk like this? Your gun has got you everything you have. Isn't that true? But isn't it true?
Yeah, sure, everything. After a while, you can call bartenders and faro dealers by their first name. Maybe 200 of them. Rented rooms you live in, 500. Meals you eat in hash houses, 1,000. Home, none. Wife, none. Kids, none. Prospects, 0. Suppose I left anything out?
Yeah. Places you're tied down to, none. People with a hold on you, none. Men you step aside for, none.
Insults swallowed, none. Enemies, none.
No enemies?
Alive. Well,
There's two sides to everything. Right. I love that scene. They just go back and forth. They're conflicted in who they are.
I mean, they break down the idea of the American cowboy right there without being terribly cynical. I just think this movie did conversation really well, which is not something you typically think of for Westerns. You think of like one-liners.
Yes.
But not dialogue scenes so much.
That's true. But now it seems like, at least at the beginning of this conversation, you were still kind of just putting this in the camp of like an average Western. So were there things that maybe either didn't meet your expectations, or you just kind of were like, it didn't?
Well, in a lot of ways, it is still an average Western. I mean, the Chico character, I really don't dig. Like, I find him pretty irritating.
Join the club. He is very irritating.
But a lot of the storyline hinges on him, and
it's true.
And I don't like it's. There's a lot there thematically, but I just didn't really care about it. The impulsive and the wanting to avoid your past, and like, what are you running from?
Right, obnoxious. Like, I think the part that wins him over to the 7 is when he goes up and rings the bell in the tower, and then comes out and calls the whole village cowards. Yul Brynner's character and Steve McQueen's character are kind of like, he's in now.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Like that was obnoxious for him to go up there and ring that bell and then get down and like
just berate these
just
people.
berate and preach to these people.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
What I do like though is how that character is resolved at
Uh-huh.
the end. I like the fact that, I mean, basically by the end you've got 3 people who live out of the 7.
Yeah.
You've got Chris, the Yul Brynner character. You've got the Steve McQueen character, Vin.
Yeah.
And you've got Chico.
Yeah.
And you get the idea that Vin and Chris are going to go off and just continue to be who they are.
Right.
Chico's the one that because he kind of is the person who is that coming of age character in the movie. And you don't really know which way he's going to go. Yeah. And you would think that everything leading up to that point, he's been so much about having to prove himself, and he obviously has a lot of insecurities.
Yeah.
And feels like he doesn't quite match up to the group. And for him to get to a spot where he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, he can actually just live a quiet life in this village and not feel like, he's missing something, or he's not being the hero that he could be.
Yeah.
I like how that's resolved.
Need to redefine himself. Yeah. I do like that he kind of quietly realized that in the effort to keep his farm background from defining himself, he was letting it still define him as somebody and like control his life. And also it was in keeping with the idea of, what the right thing is to do, so just do it.
Right.
And he ends up doing it.
Right. And in a way, the movie, by doing that with his character, once again reinforces this idea of like being a farmer and working the land is not a disrespectable
exactly
idea.
Yeah, that's fine. I still spend almost all the movie
rolling your eyes,
waiting for him to be off screen.
Yeah.
This is just a weird thing. Big fight at the end, and like they're kind of like looking at the dead bodies, and the women are just shucking corn. Like they're all just like, have they been doing that the whole time? Like, all right, stay low, ladies, but we got to get this corn.
They're playing their part, you know. That's hey. If they don't do that, they're not going to eat after the slaughter.
Right. Okay.
True. I don't know that I even caught that, to be honest.
Well, it was just so weird because they like walk away from the guys like standing there like, and then they like kind of walk around the corner past the women just like, yep, scraping corn. Wait, have you guys been here this whole time? There was a fight, like a big fight.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just a little dumb thing.
Well, so I have a question for you though. So Chico is the one that you obviously find the most annoying.
Yeah.
Is there one maybe other than Yul Brynner that you really do kind of like a lot? Maybe I should put it this way: is there one of them that hit you the most as like
that if we were playing Magnificent Seven, I would want to be
like that's the guy I wish I could be cast as.
I like the James Coburn.
Oh, you stole my guy.
Sorry,
Britt.
Yeah,
the knife guy,
the knife throwing guy.
Oh, he just looks so cool.
He does, but did you notice in the final fight when he's shooting, he like just like stands straight up and puts his gun out, like, bang.
But I think it's his face and just
James Coburn's got
like he is the guy in that movie that's just the quiet one, you know, and just fearless.
Yeah.
If I was cast as him, I wouldn't actually have much dialogue, so they wouldn't see how bad of an actor I was. I could just look badass.
All right. Well, I wasn't thinking about it that way.
No, I'm not either. Actually, I just think he's the guy who, of the seven, I just every time he was on screen, I was like, that guy's cool.
Yeah,
that guy is cool.
Yeah.
Brit. Oh, one thing I wanted to talk about actually that I realized this time around that I totally missed.
Yeah.
Is more than any other Western, Magnificent Seven has to be the inspiration for Three Amigos.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's a movie I loved, and I don't know why when I first saw Magnificent Seven, I didn't immediately go, oh, it's just Three Amigos. Because it's the exact same plot, and it's just the Three Amigos instead of the Magnificent Seven, basically. And you've even got like El Guapo is the Calvera character through and through.
I really want to watch Three Amigos now.
After watching Magnificent Seven, I totally wanted to just pop in Three Amigos.
That's a good point. I need to like write that down.
What's
Make
that?
sure to watch Three Amigos soon.
Yeah, don't forget.
I can't. I bet like that there's no other inspiration for Three Amigos than Magnificent Seven.
It always kind of confused me that it was sort of this parody of a Western, but so much of it took place in Mexico. And just the thought of like, okay, let's take the Magnificent Seven, but instead of like these really professional, cool gunfighters, they're just sort of these, you know, fish out of water, like Nancy actors who think they're on a movie set the whole time.
That scene where they've realized they're not and they start crying is, anyway, we don't have to talk about Three Amigos. I do want to talk again about the music. We talked about like the main theme, which is very iconic, but I found myself really enjoying the other music in the movie. I wonder, I have no idea if this is true, but you've got that scene from There Will Be Blood where the oil derrick blows up and it's just that percussion music by Johnny Greenwood.
Scene. That's one of my probably all-time favorite movie scenes, period. It's just so riveting. Yeah.
Even though that music is why he wasn't nominated for the Oscar.
I know. It's a criminal act.
Stupid.
We can't go there right now.
I know we can't. But it reminded me very much of as Calavera's approaching and like the boys are like waving their hats and stuff.
Oh yeah.
That is all drums. It's all percussion. And it even gets to a point where it's really like arrhythmic and like syncopated in a very,
that's right.
very much Johnny Greenwood sort of way. score beyond just being classic Western, I don't think that those touches are classic Western at all.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I don't know. Overall, yeah. I don't know. Maybe 3.5 is a little harsh. I'll meet you at 4.
You don't have to.
No, there's no reason not to. I don't think Chico's that bad of a character that like it makes Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen not cool.
Let me ask you something. Is there something almost on a gut instinct level where you hear, oh, it's just a remake of Seven Samurai, and you almost kind of instinctually think, you know, it's an American remake of a foreign film that rarely goes as well as the original?
I don't think that plays into it for me.
No? Okay.
No.
It did the first time I saw it.
I really like reimaginings.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
I actually really like this idea of the samurai Western almost having this like ping pong kind of thing going on. I kind of had to remember that Seven Samurai isn't that old of a movie compared to Magnificent Seven. Like Seven Samurai
it's like 6 years before,
It's
right?
1954. And then this is 1960. So it's not like he was redoing a movie that he had seen in his childhood, Sturges, or, you know.
Right.
And so Kurosawa was influenced by John Ford and the classic American Westerns. So it's just this very circular thing happening of like, you know, the Westerns influencing the samurai movies then influencing the newer Westerns.
Yeah.
And
well, even Sanjuro and Yojimbo became the Man with No Name movies.
Right. Exactly. I don't know, that there's this cool relationship that you see bouncing back and forth between
mythologies of
the two
different
genres. Yeah.
And the mythologies of different nations and the histories.
Right. And how well they click and how well they work. Like Seven Samurai, you know, is through and through a samurai movie, and then it just works so perfectly as an American Western too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, on our scale of best buds.
Oh, we're best buds.
Mutual understanding. It's complicated.
We're best buds. We're Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner at the end of the movie, but we're not Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner in real life. They hated each other. Kind of disappointing because they're such a pair. But
yeah, what could have been?
Yeah. So we're Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner in the movie.
I'm
not in real life.
I'm fine
You're
living
fine
in
with
that fantasy world.
Okay, me too.
Good. And I'm going to leave mine at 4 stars. You're actually
I'll bump it up.
4
I'll
stars.
bump it
So
up.
that's good.
It is I really did.
All right.
It's a good movie.
Yeah. Well, we did our first Western.
Wow. Hey.
I don't know. It went all right.
I think so. Yeah.
We touched on a lot. I'm actually hoping we can do it again sometime.
Oh yeah, I would. There's plenty of westerns I would love to watch again. Three Amigos.
That'd be great. Probably not, but let's
talk about what we're doing next time.
Yes, let's do that.
Our next episode is going to be our Halloween episode.
I always look for always being our
the
third
last
time.
3 years. Yeah.
I always look
3
forward to
years though. This is our third Halloween episode.
That's pretty crazy.
Typically, we watch an older one that one or both of us haven't seen. The first one was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which neither of us had seen. I don't believe either of us will watch again.
Oh man,
because
that was such a good
it's
conversation
so
and
unsettling.
episode, though. I actually, that might be when I go and just listen to our conversation because that movie still sticks with me.
Me too.
Just as
it's
a great horror
shocking movie.
Yeah.
Last year we did Nightmare on Elm Street, which I had never seen. Nate had. Anyway, and this year we're doing a movie neither of us had seen. I know it's a movie that a lot of I see filmmakers talking about it a lot, critics talking about it a lot. 1973, The Wicker Man is what we're going to watch. If I'm not mistaken, and I may be mistaken and this sounds stupid, I think that it's in part inspiration for some of Hot Fuzz, what happens in Hot Fuzz.
I'm saying I had not heard that, but sure.
You heard it when I said it.
Yes.
Thank you for acknowledging my voice is working.
You are saying words, and that did make sense to me.
But also the recent Radiohead music video for Burn the Witch. It's a little bit of a claymation version of some of the Wicker Man.
One of my favorite records of the year.
Well, there you go.
So
I really like it too.
I'm super excited to watch this movie.
I
just
Christopher
love
Lee, so kind of like classic horror actor. That's what we're doing. I'm excited to watch it.
This is really the time of year where I fill in those gaps with horror. And so Wicker Man is definitely one for me that needs to be filled, and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So I hope you do it with us, or you rewatch it if you've seen it before. I'd actually love to hear what some of our listeners think of The Wicker Man before we watch it, or maybe some things that we should be paying attention to. The Wicker Man, I don't even know much about it, to be honest. Like what it's about.
I don't either.
Like I just think of like wicker baskets.
It is, I believe, a wicker basket salesman.
Well, it says a police sergeant sent to a Scottish island village
Scotland
in search of a missing girl
not England.
whom the townsfolk claim never existed.
Oh,
now I'm intrigued.
So is the girl a wicker man? And that's why it's like a schematic, like a Scottish dialect problem.
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah,
it sounds. I mean, linguistic horror movies were big in the 70s, just
They
like
were.
semantic,
really bringing out the horror of words and how they're used.
Yeah, and the limitations of language, just really scary.
Words
You didn't
have
even
no
notice.
meaning.
That's right.
Really,
That's right. That's right.
no control.
Yeah.
Well, great. And
Well-
now I'm not going to sleep tonight. Thanks.
And you know what? We use words all the time, and they're the scariest things.
And I'm sure our listeners have a lot to say about that.
Oh
when they
gosh,
use
using
their-
words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is going to scare the shit out of me.
Oh boy. Well, tis the season.
So, if you have any thoughts on The Wicker Man or on The Magnificent Seven or any of our past episodes, we always encourage you to talk to us.
Yeah.
Talk to us, baby. There's a lot of ways to do that.
There's a baby in here that Nate's talking to. We've got Twitter at CWSBF. We've got Facebook. Email us at feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. Visit our website. Leave a comment. CanWeStillBeFriends.net. Give us a call and leave us a voicemail if you really want to. And the number for that, Nate.
Oh, here it is. I've actually got it ready this time. All right, 847-306-9532.
Fantastic. And as always, a really big help to us would be a favorable rating on iTunes, maybe a little comment there, and share the podcast with your friends and family.
Yeah, keep this party going.
Yeah, and it is a party.
I also want to just point out that if you're ever wondering, how do I know all the movies Ryan and Nate have talked about on the podcast?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you figure that out?
Hear that all the time.
You know, it might seem like a very hard thing to figure out, but it's actually not that bad. All you have to do is go to our website, canwestillbefriends.net, and there is a page called The Movies. And alphabetically lists out every movie we've ever talked about on this podcast.
That's really convenient.
Hit up that page and then see if there's any movies there that you didn't catch and that you've maybe seen and want to hear our rant about it.
Yeah. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next.
Catch you next time. I don't know.
That's fine.
And we're rolling. Is it episode 44?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
I checked.
All right.